welcome to that Groovy Scoobcast, your go-to audio hub for all things Scooby Doo.
So, I don't think we've really ever talked about it here on the podcast, but there was someone else who was lined up to be a host on this podcast before Shannon was asked to be on it.
What? What happened to him?
Well, he got involved with drugs.
Drugs? Yuck.
Yeah, that sure isn't very smart. Drugs can mess you up, even kill you.
Welcome back. Not quite sure why you came back, but you're here.
And I'm sure you weren't anticipating that as the intro, but we weren't anticipating that as part of the plot of Scooby Dude from A Pup Named Scooby-Doo.
But, fun fact, not our fun fact of the week, but Scooby Dude was a PSA on the war on drugs.
I was shocked.
I wasn't prepared for it.
Especially because the premise alluded to this in no way.
No, it was just going to be a normal episode.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden drugs are involved, and we had to take a moment.
We had to pause it.
We took a moment. And
I curled up on the couch and died a little bit inside.
Well, before we start talking about Scooby Doo, let's kick off our Mystery Machine match. This is our weekly trivia competition where Shannon and I try to figure out which one of us knows Scooby Doo better than the other.
For somehow it is me.
Yeah, because you are currently sitting with 15 points and I'm sitting with 12. Maintaining your lead, consistently this season, I see.
Hopefully I don't lose it in the last few seconds like last time.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, as always, Shannon, you can go first today.
In which Scandinavian country does a Viking boat race take place in Scooby-Doo All-Star Laugh Olympics? Denmark, Norway, or Sweden?
Was it Sweden?
No, it was Norway.
Norway? Damn. Okay. Well, here is your first question today. The Scooby-Doo gang gets locked inside the Smithsonian Institute in what city that is home to the U.S. government?
DC?
Yeah. You were so hesitant.
I'm so tired. I was like, fuck, where is the White House?
Am I even an American anymore? What's your next question?
Pamela Anderson, who had a cameo in the Scooby-Doo movie, starred as a lifeguard in what series? I can give you a hint. You've been watching Friends, right?
Yeah.
Chandler and Joey watch this show.
Shit.
I gave you the answer. Come on, you know it.
Oh, Baywatch.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm shocked that I got that
I was
one.
like, please. They watch it religiously.
Okay, here's your next question. Howard Morris, who did the voice of Bogle in The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, had a recurring role in what long-lived television sitcom?
I don't know.
I don't have any hint for you on this one. I'm sorry.
You can't help
I don't
me
know
at all?
I don't know anything about this show. No.
I have no idea then.
The Andy Griffith Show.
Oh. Yeah, no, it was in the 70s, I think.
I have no fucking idea.
It came on at 10 o'clock at night. But even if you told me those two things, I would still have no idea.
What's your last question for me?
Name the circus owner in Bedlam at the Big Top. Is it Barnstone or Greenfield?
I think it was Greenfield.
No, it was Barnstone.
Barnstone? Damn it.
I really thought that was the one I knew you were going to get.
I guess not. Here's your last question. What kind of trip does the gang go on in the episode That's Snow Ghost? Fishing or skiing?
Skiing?
Yep, you're right.
Phew. All right, where are we at?
It looks like today we're finishing with you with 17 points, and I am finishing with 13.
Woohoo!
This is getting frustrating.
Yay!
Well, that concludes this week's Mystery Machine match. Now we will move on to our review of Scooby Dude. Today's premise is coming from Scoobypedia for this episode. The kids head over to the Marine Institute to help Velma's Aunt Thelma figure out where all the dolphins have disappeared to, but they discover a headless skateboarder who tries to chase them away.
He's not really headless.
I just don't get why the monster was a headless skateboarder at all. There was no lore, no background to why this headless skateboarder is haunting the beach.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not like it was some, like, ancient...
It's not like it's guarding
monster,
any kind of cursed treasure or, like, there's just nothing at all connecting this monster to the mystery itself.
Exactly.
And then, also the premise leaves out the fact that this is a fucking drug PSA episode, but...
Surprise.
Yeah, so we're pretty sure this episode fell in line with the Just Say No campaign from the 80s and the early 90s, and it's really in your face about it, too, to an extent, once the drugs actually play into the story.
Like, they
once
don't
it's mentioned,
hesitate.
it's like, oh, shit. Because
And
at first we thought that it was going to go away.
Yeah.
And then it got brought back up again, and we were shook again.
I mean, both of us were in such denial the whole time. I want to say especially me. Like, I was just like, oh, okay, like, so he did drugs. Like, it's not a big deal. And then they brought it back a second time. And then when they, like, made it, it was, like, the whole point. And I was just so shook I couldn't deal with it.
And the reveal of who the villain is ultimately makes the episode even weaker. I was so disappointed, surprised, and...
I was rooting for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, there was just a lot of things going on in this episode that I did not anticipate and was really surprised about in the end.
But I want to start at the very beginning of the episode.
With the sun that's wearing sunglasses in the sky?
No, but that was weird.
I think NASA should investigate that. Just saying. Because the sun is smiling, wearing sunglasses.
I
it's
think
cool.
the sun is on drugs. But that's just me.
Separate theory.
I've got a few for this episode, actually. But,
okay.
So Velma and her Aunt Thelma. I thought that was weird.
I hate it because Velma is frequently mistakenly misnamed as Thelma by a lot of people who just don't watch the show and they think her name is Thelma. Maybe it's rooting from this episode. I don't know.
It's weird and I hate it.
I wish that they would just deviate a little. It's kind of like when Shaggy's family have names that rhyme with Shaggy. It's like, are you really that lazy? Like his sister being named Maggie.
Which is stupid because Shaggy's name
is a nickname.
Is Norman. Norville.
Yeah. And then there's also like Fred, who's Uncle Ed.
Yeah.
Runs the National Exaggerator.
Yeah, that's not like it's no.
But Velma's Aunt Thelma, she runs the Marine Institute in Coolsville. So apparently dolphins have been disappearing from the institute, and the gang has been brought in to, investigate what's going on.
First, I want to talk about the fact of, could you imagine being a grown woman who basically runs
a scientific institute?
And you have to call in your 6-year-old niece because your dolphins are disappearing? Like...
That's kind of sad.
I'd be so upset. I'd be like, what the fuck has my life come to? So they get there, everybody's like getting ready to go in, and Shaggy and Scooby are nowhere to be found until they pan over to the beach. Shaggy sets up camp like Spy Kids.
Oh yeah, when he like throws out like his beach chairs and all of his beach, stuff like the radio.
I'm now convinced that that's where Spy Kids came up with it.
I just think that it's him being a wizard and executing his wizard powers.
I mean, possibly.
Because that theory came from a Pup Named Scooby-Doo, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
It's just Shaggy being Wizard Shaggy.
He's a kid. He doesn't really know that, like, he's not supposed to do it in front of other people yet.
Right, yeah. Yeah, he thinks that it's fine.
Yeah. So he just does it. I mean, it's just, okay.
I thought it was funny because he and Scooby started partying. They were dancing to the music.
They danced for like 2 whole minutes.
I was like, why is this going on so long? And then Daphne cuts it short. I made a note that when she picked up the radio to turn it off, she picked it up and it was like facing her. But then it's also revealed that the radio is like a double-sided radio. Like, it's the way, it was an animation error, I think. But
she picked it up so that the back was facing us, but then when she went to, like, turn the knob, suddenly the front was there.
It's a double-sided radio.
It has to be.
Wizardry.
So maybe she's a wizard, too?
No, I think it's just an enchanted item of Shaggy's.
So it's an always front-facing radio.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what way you approach it. It's just always front-facing. It's kind of convenient,
I kind of would want that. Yeah, that's kind of cool.
It's kind of like with a phone, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
If you picked up a phone and it's always just facing you, so you don't have to turn it around and be, a lazy muggle.
Yeah, right. Us lazy muggles always having to pick up and turn our phones over.
I know. It's such a hassle. I hate it.
That sounds like one of those, like little things where, like, they open up the cupboard and all the Tupperware comes out. Infomercials.
Oh,
yeah. It sounds like an infomercial. Do you have trouble picking up and turning over your phone to make a phone call?
Well, now try the double-sided phone. Every time you pick it up, you will always have the front of the phone facing you.
But wait, if you act right now, we'll throw in another phone.
For absolutely no price, just pay shipping and handling. That's how those infomercials work, too.
They are. We'd make really good infomercial commercials. I'm struggled really bad.
Really struggled right there. Holy shit.
Infomercial commercials.
I'm not fixing that. You get to live with that. So, Shaggy and Scooby, they beg Daphne to go surfing real quick before they go inside the Marine Institute. Daphne lets them do it. I liked that Scooby had a bone-shaped surfboard.
I thought that was so cute.
I don't know how practical it will actually be in the water, but it was a nice thing to see.
Yes.
They go out in the water, and they get attacked by a seaweed monster.
Which I thought was going to be the monster.
And that would have made a lot more sense, given they're at the beach. Dolphins are going missing. There's an underwater cave. Yeah, a seaweed monster would have been great. But no, let's do a headless skateboarder, because that just makes fucking sense.
Yeah. So this seaweed monster comes chasing after the gang, and everybody's screaming until Daphne looks down and goes, wait, I'd recognize those legs anywhere. That's Red Herring.
Because, same.
So...
Well, no, Fred actually said before she revealed who it was, he said, Zorg, king of the tuna people.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
And then she said, no, it's Red Herring. But my next theory is that Daphne and Red are gonna date eventually.
Okay.
Throughout this entire episode, so she recognizes his legs from anywhere.
Okay.
The way that she says it, like, she looks over at Shaggy later on in this scene, and she goes, he's such a goon. And it was just the way she said it was like, oh, he's such a goon. And then, like, he insults her. Now, keep in mind, like, they're kids, and, like, boys will be boys, and so they insult you to make, sound like they like you, whatever. Like, that bullshit that we were always taught. But, like, that was this day and age. And so he calls her waterlog lips.
Oh,
so,
I didn't write that down at all.
Yeah, so, like, at one point, like, way later in the episode, when they're underwater, and he says something, because he hires Fred to, like, clear his name or whatever, and so Daphne's like, well, we're also working this one, and he's like, well, you couldn't solve anything with your waterlog lips. And it was just like, well, fuck. And, like...
So that's just your working theory?
Like, I think eventually we're not gonna see it, obviously, but that would explain why Fred hates him so much.
I guess that is a good point. Greetings, relation.
Okay, so now we're on to my next theory.
This one had me laughing when you suggested it.
Look, as I said in the beginning, I have a lot of theories for this whole episode, because the whole thing is just fucked up.
She premised this by asking me, have we ever met Velma's grandparents? No, why?
I think Velma's grandpa is a computer.
Like, she straight up said that.
Okay, so here's my logic behind it. As I'm thinking, maybe it's Velma's grandmother, but one of them is definitely a computer. The reason I said grandfather is because, like...
Grandfather specifically.
Because, like, robots can't carry and birth children. But,
But robots can inseminate eggs?
Maybe? I don't know.
What?
So, okay.
I think your knowledge on robots is a little flawed. You may need to go get
So
that chat.
Velma is definitely like part computer.
She speaks like a thesaurus.
Yeah.
Like she replaces every word possible in a spoken sentence with a longer and unnecessarily intellectual word.
You're exhausting.
I
Yeah,
know,
that was
yeah.
literally and then, you know, obviously we know Velma and she's just like super smart, super techie.
But she doesn't talk like that.
No, but that's because she's third generation. Like they've learned, they're growing.
Oh, so they're becoming more human-like.
Exactly.
So you think Velma is
it
part robot?
So it could have even been like Velma's great-great-great-grandfather, and just throughout the years they're learning. Because like by this point they look human, but Velma is still kind of acting human. So by the time the next generation rolls around, they're almost perfect.
And then she gets possessed by Marla Frumpkin.
And then, I mean, that's just a huge decline in how far the robot generation has come. But think about it, okay? Because we know that they're like scientists and, you know, whatever, like they have a line of scientists. We just watched the Frankenstein, and like Velma's family like dealt with the Frankenstein monster. Like, okay, so maybe like they were dealing with computers and got a little too friendly with them. I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm almost 100% sure Velma's genes are part computer.
I will let you sit with that theory until we get more evidence to conclusively say one way or the other.
Okay.
So Thelma takes them around the Institute and introduces them to, what was it, Skipper? Yeah, Skipper the dolphin. She says that all the other dolphins have disappeared. Skipper is fucking huge.
He's
huge
giant.
Dolphin.
His head is like 2 Scoobies.
Yeah, that sounds accurate. Thelma also suspects that it has something to do with the monster. Not sure why, because this monster is not at all, you know, what you would think when it comes to a monster haunting a marine institute or the beach.
It's just
like, you know what I think of? I think of a headless person on a skateboard with a jack-o'-lantern.
You know what I think of? A seaweed monster.
Yep. So this is when the headless skateboarder appears. This is the first time we're seeing him. And he chases everybody around the Marine Institute. I noted that at one point, Shaggy and Scooby hide in one of the fish tanks and disguise themselves as mermaids.
I thought that was cute.
After the attack, Skipper disappears. They were all racing to get back to the fish tank because they heard Skipper, you know...
in distress.
Yes, and they didn't make it in time because now Skipper is gone. I'm just thinking to myself, like, how on earth did this dolphin get out? How did they get the dolphin out?
Yeah.
You suggested something about them opening the gate in the pool, but I'm not really even sure if that specific pool had the exit way into the ocean.
I'm going to say most do. Like, if you are a learning, or if you're like a marine institute, 90% of the time you're lined up against the ocean. So, like, your exhibits also line up to the ocean.
I don't know. I just don't... What I don't like is that they don't explain how they got the dolphin out. They could have just said that, but they didn't say it.
They never talked about it.
No, it was never talked about.
Do you want to know why they never talked about it?
Because they were so focused on the drugs.
Exactly, because the drugs were so much more...
The mystery became subservient to the PSA that the episode was trying to push.
Exactly. And also, we didn't even think about it until we kind of started recording.
Right.
Because the drugs have just had... We were shook.
Yes.
I can't even talk.
Scooby detects a clue. He goes following it and leads the gang to a hot dog stand. Because
he's a fucking bitch.
Velma says Jinkies, and Daphne looks at the camera and says, "Did you hear that?" Velma says Jinkies. Like Dora the Explorer style.
It just really like, did you see Sniper?
I always just forget how...
interactive.
Sniper? Did you say Sniper?
I did.
Sniper, no sniping.
Oh, man. So wiper.
So she says Jinkies because she found a jelly bean on the ground.
Which, I'm sorry, is no reason to say
That's
Jinkies.
not Jinkies worthy, but okay. and they discover a whole trail of food leading to the bathrooms. Shaggy and Scooby proceed to eat the food.
It's disgusting.
Not knowing where it came from, or how long it has been on the ground, or if it has been eaten by, maybe other animals, or...
My note for that was, sure, let's eat beach scraps off the ground.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
I'm 100% sure there's fecal matter somewhere on that ground. Okay, because birds shit. You swim in the ocean where fish...
Fists?
You swim in the ocean where fish... Oh my god.
Oh my god, Shannon.
You swim in the ocean where fish shit.
Yes.
People also shit. Like, you're picking it up off the ground and you're putting it in your mouth. And there's sand, so this is sandy food.
This is just not a good idea, guys.
It's gross. Don't do it. It's nasty.
It leads them to the bathrooms, like we said, and they get attacked by what appears to be the headless skateboarder, when in reality it's just Red Herring fucking with them again.
Because he wants to pick on his girlfriend, Daphne.
Oh, yeah. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Red Herring gets scolded by Sandy Sneakers, who is a beach patrol officer. She is really, stuck up about the situation, saying that, the monster is... not to be dealt with, and...
It cracked me up because she said one line, which reminded me of, things that I've seen in TV shows today, where she said, you really can't dress up as a monster these days. And it really made me think of, how people portray, people of color on TV now, where they're like, you can't do that nowadays. And it's just oh, shit, it was monster.
Oh, it's not, politically correct.
You can't do that nowadays. And I'm just oh, that's how you can't dress up as a monster nowadays? Why? What happens?
You're gonna offend somebody.
Did I trigger someone by dressing up as the monster? My bad.
So, did she take him away at this point?
So I think she chased him and he got away.
Okay.
But also one of my favorite lines came out of this where she was like, you can't dress up as a monster. And he was like, okay, so when are you going to take off your mask?
Ooh.
I was fuck.
And it has even more meaning because she is part of the villain scheme.
We can't spoil that yet.
I'm going to spoil it. That she is part of it, but we're not going to go into all of it just yet. We meet Gnarly Charlie, a surfer, who seems to support the monster. He was saying about how, the monster would keep people out of the water, which I thought was kind of funny because of who he actually turns out to be.
Yeah.
We'll get to that in a little bit. They find a sign that says Al's Skateboarderama, and they think that maybe that's a place where they'll find some clues, so they meet Al, the person who runs the establishment. He claims that he does not know how to skateboard. He just rents them out. And the gang believes him.
I mean, I believed him for a moment, only because, I work at a retail shop, but that doesn't mean I know everything.
Well, we also had a suspect by this point,
yeah,
too, being Gnarly Charlie. We both were really convinced that Gnarly Charlie was going to be...
the bad guy.
The bad guy, yes. The gang looks around the skaterama. They're about to go into a shed when the headless skateboarder attacks, and Velma pulls a ramp out of her suitcase, and the ramp defies physics because the headless skateboarder is not at all going fast enough to be able to go onto that ramp and then blast off into the sky like he did in this episode. I was offended by this inaccuracy of science being portrayed in a cartoon.
But when have they ever listened to physics?
I guess that's true. But this specifically triggered me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just like the monster costume triggered someone else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Shaggy goes through a checklist before he and the gang initiate their chase
Which I loved.
from the monster.
Helmets?
Check.
Knee pads?
Check.
Elbow pads?
Check.
Oh, come on, hurry up. Oh, hold on. Monster? Yeah, I'm here.
It was funny. So he does chase them away from the skaterama, and they decide they're going to return at night to investigate that shed because they kind of put two and two together. They were about to go into the shed when
the
he
monster
attacked.
Yeah.
So they come back, Fred is devising a whole crazy scheme where...
Can we talk about, like, when we first met Al, your very first comment was Al looks high?
He did look high, yes. I thought he was baked, like...
Which is funny because later on, like, this is a PSA about drugs, so not
knowing at all this episode was going to be about drugs.
We had no idea. So when we first saw drugs, and Derek was like, oh, he looks high, and I was just like, oh yeah, that's funny, ha ha ha. Later on in the episode, they start talking about drugs, and I was like, oh my god, he was fucking high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was really thrown off because I said that kind of just in passing because of the way the character looked.
And that's how a lot of the characters look. So
yeah, but not thinking at all it was going to go in this direction. But
neither of us did.
So, like I was saying, they come back at night. Fred devises a whole elaborate plan to break into the shed with him and Daphne going in through the roof and
tunneling.
Yes, and Daphne's like, Fred, how about we just try the door? And he's like, oh yeah, that was my plan B.
So now the weirdest thing happens ever. They walk into the shed and it's messy. And this hand comes out from the side with a sign. Yeah, of the screen with a sign that says messy, isn't it?
And it's not of the gang.
No.
Because the hand appears on the far right of the screen and the gang are coming in through the door that's on the far left of the screen. So, like, that's not any member of the gang. You suggested Shaggy, but Shaggy doesn't have a long sleeve shirt.
But it was green.
That doesn't mean anything.
Maybe it was Shaggy's dad or son from the future.
Yes. Let's go with that. It was definitely the second one. So they find a bunch of trophies after Daphne insists that she cleans the shed. Velma even hands her vacuum cleaner. Because Velma just carries that.
I mean, same.
I expect you to always have my vacuum cleaner handy.
I mean, I've got a lot of shit in my purse.
You do, and I would not be surprised if there was a vacuum cleaner in there, so I'm just going to throw mine in there for, shits and grits. So the trophies are all for skateboarding competitions, and they find that Al's name is written on those trophies. So they kind of do a background check with Velma's briefcase computer.
Which is still the coolest thing ever.
Oh, yeah. And this is when they discover that he was like a champion, skateboarder, and it was awesome. And then Shaggy butts in and it's like, but then he got involved with drugs. And that's just when the entire episode
changes.
Went, whoa! Yeah. So like Scooby was like, drugs? Yuck. And Velma says, that sure isn't very smart. Drugs can mess you up, even kill you.
And then they move on.
Exactly. Yeah, it was just so out of left field. Like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What?
And
drugs?
And the
drugs?
fact that everybody was just like, yeah, and then they like start searching for clues again. We had to pause it and just be like, what the fuck just happened?
Wait a minute. Yeah. So they confront Al like that second, because they go right to him and he's sleeping, so he's answering the door in the middle of the fucking night. Like, what the fuck is going on?
I would not answer my door. I'm sorry.
No, I wouldn't either.
I'd call the police and be terrified because now there's a murderer outside trying to kill me.
So he explains that he, was a champion. He was having an awesome career, and then he fell in with the wrong crowd, and it ruined his entire career.
He started getting with... And he never mentioned drugs, by the way. He just said he fell in the wrong crowd.
Well, I mean, it was all in the detail that Fred, presented him.
And so then he goes, then I got out of jail, took what little money I had, and opened this place.
Yeah.
And, like, in the meantime, as he's telling this story, like, he's getting teary-eyed.
Yeah, he's emotional.
Like, he's been working his ass off, and, like, it's one of those stories that, like, his past just keeps coming into the, present, and, like, just keeps screwing him over, and like he can't move escape it. The past. And so you're really feeling for this guy as an adult. You're like, man, like he's really trying to like
turn his life around and get his shit together.
And, like these fucking 6-year-olds show up and are like, yo, we ran a background check on you. Like it's just really upsetting. I'm really rooting for Al.
Right. And ultimately we get slapped in the face.
Al fucking let me down.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So they move on from Al's Skaterama. They find Red Herring in a bush. I don't recall why he was... You know what? He was hiding from Sandy.
Yeah.
I just think it's funny because I think it's in the middle of the night still. So if she's chasing him at night...
I mean, she was dealing with the drug problem and...
Yeah, but then I'm also thinking, Red Herring, go home.
Your mom is worried about you. Also, why... Like, I guess the gang is with Velma, so, like, Red, go home.
Yeah, but they're conducting an investigation.
Yeah.
They're doing big kid work. Like, Red Herring...
Go home.
You need to go home and quit fucking around here.
Go to bed. You have a bedtime.
Exactly. You have school tomorrow. The gang doesn't because...
school? They're working.
Right. So he wants to hire the gang to clear his name because Sandy is so insistent on him being the headless skateboarder.
Yeah.
Fred refuses, and then Red Herring counters by offering to pay him half price, which Fred then agrees to.
And then comes back like a proud little puppy, and Daphne's like...
Great businessman,
yeah,
Fred.
like,
He's proud of what he accomplished there.
I mean, I guess because getting Red Herring to agree to anything is successful. I don't know.
So they decide to continue their investigation by going to investigate the nearby underwater area.
Yeah.
So they're going to go scuba diving.
Which is funny because, like, would you really think to go underwater? I mean, I guess so, because, like, dolphins live in the water.
But at the same time, there's no indication that the monster is at all related to the water.
So it was just funny that I was like, I wouldn't have thought of that. But, you know, we're not doing the big kid job. We're not getting the big bucks. So that's why we're not...
We're not detectives.
No.
We are not detectives.
We're podcasters.
Yep. So Scooby refuses to go scuba diving, so Daphne offers him a nacho-flavored Scooby snack. She pulls out the box and discovers that the box is empty. That's
you
not
know,
cool
Daphne,
at
this
all.
happens all the fucking time with you, and I need you to get your life together.
Right. But luckily, there was a woman who was selling snacks nearby. She was selling cookies and chips and nacho-flavored Scooby snacks.
Because they're just so lucky.
She gave Daphne the snacks for free.
Yep.
Daphne didn't have to pay for them.
Nope, she was super nice about it.
Yeah. So, Scooby's convinced, they decide to go. They're underwater, and Velma finds an underwater cave. Out of the cave comes the headless skateboarder. I really want to know how he functions his skateboard and everything underwater.
If you've got enough power.
You know why it is? It's because his skateboard is shaped like a shark.
Yeah.
So therefore, it functions like a shark.
Oh yeah, just like if you write Android on an iPad charger, then it'll charge an Android?
Yeah.
Okay.
Drew Gooden.
Fun fact.
Yeah. My next note was just that, you know, seeing the monster attack them underwater really just makes the monster feel not fitting for this mystery. Like I've, said before, I really wish it was a different kind of monster.
I do want to talk about the chase scene a little bit.
Why?
Because the random guy who was just driving his boat.
Yeah.
And it's like, could you imagine just driving your boat? You're having fun out there speedboating, doing your speedboat thing. And all of a sudden a dog and his boy like come out of the water. And then all of a sudden a guy on a skateboard starts skateboarding on top of the water with no head with a talking pumpkin in his hand. Like, I don't know if I'd go back out to that lake.
There was a guy on the lake. There was a guy on the lake whose boat was called the Toad.
I missed that.
Yeah. I am wondering how the speaker that's inside the pumpkin, that's making the pumpkin talk, as we learn at the end of the episode, is functioning underwater.
Maybe, like, the pumpkin is waterproof.
But are the speakers?
Well, no, like, it's all encapsulated in the waterproof, so anything inside of it is good.
But it's a jack-o'-lantern. There's holes. Water is getting into it.
Maybe it's not actually a hole. Maybe it's just, like, black felt. But, like, waterproof felt. Like, scuba suit. I don't... Honestly, like, normally I wouldn't be willing to believe it, but this guy... This team is actually a pretty decent, like, drug smuggling team.
Oh, yes. Just stealing dolphins. Let's commit one crime to commit more crimes.
Yeah. Instead of just taking the many dolphins that are out in the ocean, let's take these ones.
Oh, because you're just going to go find dolphins?
I mean, dolphins aren't hard to find.
Go find me one right now.
We're not anywhere near an ocean.
Go find me a dolphin now.
I'm saying if you're by the ocean, There are probably 1 million dolphins.
There's a million?
They're not extinct. They're not even close to it the last time I checked.
Fact of this week, guys. There are 1 million dolphins.
I hate you.
Yep.
Anyway. So in the midst of this chase scene, they lose the monster guy.
Yes.
So then they go into this dark, scary tunnel that they were initially trying to go into.
And that's where they find the dolphins all caged up.
Yeah.
They also find Skipper, the one that went missing earlier in the episode.
They also find mind control devices.
Which Fred mistaked for video games. But also, duh, Fred, it's obviously a mind control device.
And more importantly than all of that, they find drugs.
Drugs. They emphasize that word, too. When Velma says it specifically,
drugs.
There's always, a pause a little bit before she actually says the word. I noticed it at the end of the episode when she said it again.
I'm wondering if, they had the actors say a different word and then, input the word drugs.
I doubt it,
but that's almost what it sounds like.
I feel like it's
edited in separately.
No, I feel like it's more of an intentional way to emphasize the word, just so that it's kind of like a trigger word, like
drugs.
Ooh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they do find the drugs in these containers that are attached to the backs of the dolphins. So obviously, whoever is behind this mystery is using the dolphins to transport the drugs to wherever they're going. I was shocked that Fred, after they discovered the drugs, he specifically said verbatim, "This means war." That was intentional as fuck.
The war on drugs, guys.
That was exactly what that was. Definitely. There was no doubt.
No, 100%.
No doubt at all.
You're telling me you find drugs and your answer is "this means war"?
That was definitely an intentional part of this PSA. The gang returns to Al's skateboarder-rama. They ask if they can look around again, so they, start heading back to the shed.
I'm going to be 100% honest, though. Even when they went back to Al's, I was still in denial.
Oh, yeah, I was, too. I was really hoping that Al was going to be a redeemable character.
And even because they come up to Al and they're like, oh, hey, and it wasn't until the second time that we watched it that I noticed it. But so they went up to Al and they were like, hey, Al, because even they don't really think that it's him anymore. He got teary-eyed. They're rooting for him, too.
Right.
So they come up and they're like, hey, Al, we're getting close to figuring out this monster. You mind if we go check out back? And Al, I noticed the second time we watched it, stutters a little bit. He goes, oh yeah, sure. So he's still acting cool about it, but he stuttered a little.
Right. And because we had also discovered when they were in the underwater cavern, there was a hatch that was going somewhere. Yeah.
But so then as they start to walk to the back, you see Gnarly Charlie go, oh, clues, psh. And then he bolts the fuck away.
Right. So he's, continuing the red herring. Yeah.
So then the monster comes out from around the shed again, starts chasing them around the skate park. It ends obviously with the monster being caught. It was kind of just a weird chase scene.
Scooby got controlled by the mind control collar.
And then he bumped into the monster and threw him into a net. It was weird.
I wasn't
it was
really
pointless. Yeah. So then they do what all the little kid shows do. Okay, we're gonna show you who all of the people are.
But do you know who it is?
So they show us they show us Sammy Sneakers, and they're like, she was the beach person, and something that I never noticed until they said it, and even when we watched it the second time, they never came out and said it, is that her tire tracks were found everywhere that the monster attack was.
Yeah.
And they never said it until that moment, so I thought that was kind of bogus. They cheated me. And then they show Gnarly Charlie, and they're like, oh, he's just a surfer, and everybody was like, yeah, but he was kind of sketchy. And
he talks like the monster, yeah.
And then they were like, well, who's the third person? Well, and then
Fred cuts in with his red herring suspicion, which I thought was funny because they were hired
to clear his
name. So now I don't think Red Herring should have to owe them the money anymore.
No. You went back on your word. I hired you to do something
and then you did the opposite. Yeah.
So then they're like, oh, well, who's the third person? And Velma goes, well, it's Al, and like yanks off the costume, and of course it's Al underneath. And immediately Al is like pissed off. He's an angry guy, which really disappointed me because again, we're rooting for him. We want him to like have redeemable qualities. And immediately he's like, screw you guys. Like, I would have gotten away with this. Like, you guys are stupid and like whatever. And it was just so disappointing because he was so lighthearted the entire time. And now he's just this angry guy.
Sandy came in and was about to take him away, but that's when Velma and Gnarly Charlie call her out, saying that she was involved with the whole scheme too. So what I think is supposed to be implied here is that somehow the fish tank that was in the back of her car, we didn't mention that, but she also had scuba gear and a fish tank in the back of her truck earlier in the episode. So, like, were they implying the fish tank was supposed to be used to transport the dolphins?
I don't know.
Because, again, they didn't explain that at all.
Well, and that was the thing, is they said that her tire tracks were everywhere that the monster was, so does that also imply down in the underwater cave?
I don't know.
Like, I'm just, like, I'm very confused.
It was a thrown-in
like bit
clue that they did not at all ever discover during the episode.
It confused me more.
Right. But yeah, so she turned out to be in on it. Gnarly Charlie turns out to be an FBI agent because, of course.
Because Scooby Doo.
Yes. And we also, kind of established that Al and Sandy were trying to frame Red Herring in the whole scheme.
Which I thought was hilarious. You're going to frame a 6-year-old. Leave him alone.
Right, exactly. You could have also not been a monster that uses skateboards to, indicate, hey, maybe it's someone who knows how to skateboard.
Yeah. Had you just been a sea monster, nobody
They never would have come to the Skaterama.
No.
Like, that's what tipped them off to come to your business where you're operating your drug smuggling scheme.
Yeah. I don't know.
If they had chosen a different monster, they probably could have continued to get away with it.
Definitely, because they would have never shown up to the Skaterama.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, like, Sandy would have gone down for it, but...
I don't know. The episode ends with Red Herring refusing to pay.
Well, so Fred walks up to Red and he's like, hey, so it's time to pay up. And Red's like, I literally paid you to do something and you didn't do it. I'm not paying you.
I'm on his side here.
Oh, I'm on Red's side too. And so then Scooby trips Red into the dolphin pool. And so then the dolphin starts playing with him and he's like, okay, fine, I'll pay. And specifically Shaggy goes, oh, collecting bills is easy for this pup and I. And I'm just like, so are you, like, implying that, because people do that. Like, they go out and, like, not necessarily beat you up for the money, but, like, beat you up for the money.
Yeah, they're like loan sharks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're going to tell me, like, so let alone are you saying drugs are bad? You're going to promote loan sharks? Like, this whole episode was just so fucked up.
I just think it's bogus that Red Herring should have to pay when... He did not get the services that he hired them for.
I hired you to clear my name, and literally the third person you said it was me. I'm not paying you.
Yeah, right. So that was Scooby Dude. Shannon, what is your rating for this episode on the Scooby Snack-O-Meter?
I don't know.
This was a hard one to talk about.
Okay.
Because you have to still talk about it in the context of being a Scooby-Doo episode... while also being a drug PSA. That's what it was.
I mean, let me say this. Like, as a Scooby-Doo episode, I think it was pretty good. Okay? I think that the mystery was pretty decent. The monster, although the monster was stupid, like, the actual premise for it and everything was pretty interesting. The whole drug smuggling thing really took me through a loop. But ultimately, like, I still kind of liked it. My issue is, like, I hate the war on drugs, and so I'm just like, I don't want to like this episode, but I did.
I'm kind of in the same boat, but I also think that as a Scooby-Doo episode, there are flaws that
100%.
need to definitely be addressed, like the really mischaracterization of a monster that has nothing to do with sea life. Stealing dolphins and doing this whole underwater dolphin scheme. Doesn't make any sense. You could have replaced the drugs with, like, I don't know, like a buried treasure. And, they're smuggling treasure out from some underwater thing. Kind of like what happened in, like, the Scaruba episode.
Yeah.
But, like, the monster still wouldn't have made sense. Like, It doesn't matter what they're smuggling. The monster doesn't make sense.
Unless they're smuggling skateboards.
Right.
Or pumpkins.
And then as a PSA about drugs, it's problematic because it shows a guy who has had trouble in the past with drugs. He even says, like, he got involved with the wrong crowd, he went to jail, and now he even tells the gang, like, he's trying to better his life.
Like, he's crying over it.
Exactly. And then the episode ending does a completely 180 portrayal of the character, where now he's a jackass who is still involved with drugs, is not turning his life around. And it kind of just sends that message that, like, if you get involved once, you can never be a redeemable person.
Yeah.
You can never be redeemed for these actions. And that's a problematic message to send to kids, because there are people who are upstanding, good citizens who have had issues in the past with drugs.
Exactly, yeah.
And saying and labeling people who do get involved with drugs as bad people is not exactly the best way to approach this conversation.
And unfortunately, though, that is what happened with
exactly.
the war on drugs.
That's what happened with the Just Say No campaign, which was really fueling the message in this episode, given the time period it came out.
And ultimately, like, as a drug PSA from the Just Say No campaign, this probably hit it right on in the nose. Like, Just Say No probably loved this idea.
Definitely. Oh, yeah.
But, like, ultimately, no, not a great message to send to people.
I think it would have been a lot better if Al was not the villain and they made Gnarly Charlie.
I think that would have been so much better, because in that instance, like, anyone would have, like, even back then, people would have been like, oh, well, he had issues with drugs, so it's definitely going to be Al.
Exactly.
And then it would have been so cool to see Al as, like, a red herring for another person, because, like, it's possible that you have issues with drugs and then you happen to live in, like, the same town as somebody else who's still in that situation. Mm-hmm. So that would have been really cool to see, and it still would have been just as good of a PSA, because it would have been still saying, like, hey, drugs are bad, but, like, you can get over it.
Oh, it would have been better, because the character would then be reinforcing that at the end, just, like, being like, I've struggled with the same thing, and I was able to get past it. Like, you don't want to go down this road. I've been there.
And honestly, that could have, like, really ended with, like, a really nice message at the end of just, like, hey, go to NA, or, like, hey, like, here's places that you can find help. And, like, that would have been so much deeper.
But unfortunately, given the time period, that wasn't part of...
they weren't going to do that.
That wasn't part of the messaging that was behind Just Say No and all of that. That's not what they were going for.
And honestly, like, if we were doing this exact podcast back then, we might agree with
in the mindset, we probably would have been praising it because of,
like, this was such a good podcast. Exactly. Yeah, but because we've seen more, we know more now. Like, we know the failures of that, and, like, the DARE program and stuff like that. I definitely think that it's a piece of, it's a product of the time. Yeah, it definitely speaks of the late 80s, early 90s, and that's really all I feel like that could have worked in. And I'll even say, like, just the other day, somebody had posted on, like, Facebook or whatever, and it was a bunch of the old, like, weed and drug campaigns from back when we were younger, and they used to play them. And as I was watching it, like, I really did remember some of them, and I was like, oh, wow, like, I forgot about that. It's weird, because back in the day, like, yes, I agreed with those, as a little kid. I didn't know better. More educated now. So it's like, now that I'm more educated, so I'm having trouble rating this, because, like, we did see a lot of this growing up.
It's a really cookie cutter, simplistic way of talking about this issue without actually being progressive, or, hey, here's a solution. Here's a better way, or here are people who have dealt with it and have become better people after getting through that.
And I'll say, I think it's because, like, back then it was still kind of taboo to talk about.
Yes,
whereas now, like, specifically with our generation nowadays, it's a lot less taboo. We talk more openly about these things, and, like, you can go to somebody and be like, hey, I've had these issues, and people will be like, hey, me too.
And there's a lot more resources available that address that.
So I'm having, like, we're just pushing off rating this episode so bad, because I'm like, I don't know.
Moral of the story, drugs are bad, people, but, like, let's not go about it in a Scooby Doo cartoon that doesn't know how to handle these issues and should not be handling these issues. No. So I'm gonna try my best to put the PSA aside from this. As a Scooby-Doo episode that is just dealing with a smuggling scheme, a dolphin, theft, and a headless skateboarder, I'm giving it a 4.
Okay.
I think that the mystery, while it makes sense what they're doing, but the monster is not right for this episode. There's clues that are just kind of inserted in this episode haphazardly. Like, the tire tracks appearing out of nowhere that they never found earlier in the episode. The lack of explanation of how they got the dolphins out of the Institute. Things like that made it weaker for me as a mystery. So I'm very comfortable at this point giving it a 4.
Okay. I want to agree with you. I'm going to give it a 5.
Okay.
Because I agree with everything you said, but ultimately, I did kind of like the episode. I'm honestly, so neutral about it because I'm so torn of, between, I did like the episode, but at the same time, like you said, everything was kind of haphazard. It was definitely very obvious that they were very concerned with making it a PSA. And
the PSA overpowered the mystery.
Exactly. And so it was just so obvious, and so I'm very torn because the mystery itself was pretty decent, but the rest of it,
So you're giving it a 5. I'm giving it a 4. So collectively, That Groovy Scoobcast rates Scooby Dude a 4.5 on the Scooby Snackometer.
All right.
Moving on to an episode that hopefully does not have to deal with drugs, we will be talking about an episode from What's New Scooby-Doo next week. Shannon, would you like to randomize this episode for us?
Of course.
All right, here we go.
So next week, we will be watching Diamonds Are a Ghoul's Best Friend.
And our premise for this episode is coming from Scoobypedia. When the gang goes to Russia to watch the Moscow Invitational Hockey Tournament, they encounter a ghostly hockey player known as the Frozen Fiend.
I think I remember this one.
Why?
It sounds familiar.
Okay. There is a fun fact about Velma that we're going to learn in this episode that I remember.
Oh, that's terrifying.
So we will be discussing that next week. So you want to hear the fun fact for the week?
Yes.
Scooby Dude is the first episode in the Scooby-Doo franchise, to my knowledge, that actually addresses a social issue, being, in this case, drugs.
All right.
And as far as I know, it's the only one.
Yeah, I don't think they don't often take on social issues.
It's a cartoon.
Well, and that's what I like, because so many things nowadays take on social issues that they really don't need to.
I mean, I think in some cases it is, but it wasn't necessary here.
No. Well, and don't get me wrong, some cartoons that are almost dedicated to these social issues do it very well.
Yes.
But Scooby-Doo is a cartoon. It is not anything that has to do with social issues. They don't need to get involved with social issues. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they jumped on this was just stupid.
But yeah, so that's the fun fact of the week, is that this is probably going to be the only episode you're ever going to see that actually addresses a social issue like this. And it's really just because of the product of the time. And if you guys would like to talk to us about Scooby Dude, the war on drugs, or Diamonds Are a Ghoul's Best Friend, you can find us on social media. You can go to Twitter at Groovy Scoobcast or Tumblr at That Groovy Scoobcast. You can also email us at thatgroovyscoobcast@gmail.com.
Also, check out our website at www.thatgroovyscoobcast.com.
And with that, we hope that you enjoyed That Groovy Scoobcast.
Come back next week for Scooby Snack-filled time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
And don't do drugs.
Ever. They could kill you.